Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, 1 hour C1 Advanced English Vocabulary Learning Podcast. The second topic name is Decoding English Speech in Noisy Environments. Welcome back to the deep dive.
So we've all been trapped in that situation, right? You're, trying to follow a really important conversation. Maybe it's work stuff at a loud conference lunch.
Oh, definitely. Or even just like a family dinner at one of those super noisy restaurants everyone seems to love now.
Exactly. And you lean in, you're trying so hard to focus, but everything just kind of melts together, this wall of sound.
It's sonic assault, yeah.
And that key piece of information, the verb, the time, the place, it just, poof, vanishes into the background.
Yeah, and that feeling, that frustration, it's not just you being easily distracted. It's actually a sign of something pretty profound about how our hearing and our brains work.
Yeah.
Well, understanding speech when there's a lot of other sound competing, that's probably one of the toughest jobs we ask our auditory system and our cognitive system to do.
And look, for those of you listening who are working in English, especially at an advanced C1 level, this isn't just annoying. It can be a serious, daily roadblock. It pushes your brain's resources right to the edge.
Okay, so let's really dig into this then. Our mission for this deep dive is to unravel the science behind why this is so hard. We're talking acoustic interference, the physical sound waves getting mixed up, and also cognitive overload.
Yeah.
The sheer mental effort involved.
Absolutely. But we're not just going to describe the problem.
No way. We want to give you a whole toolkit, like a dual-fronted arsenal of actual strategies, things you can use.
Right, for both sides of the conversation, for you as the listener trying to pull that signal out of the noise.
And also for the speaker.
Yeah.
How can they make their message clear in those tough environments? We want to help you turn that roar into something you can actually work with. So there's actually a name for that, almost like magical ability. We sometimes have to focus on one voice in a crowd, isn't there?
There is. It's called the cocktail party effect. It's a classic concept in cognitive science. A researcher named Colin Sherry first really explored it back in the 1950s.
The 1950s?
Yeah. And the fact that our brain can even do this filtering, this selective listening, it's an extraordinary feat of processing. Really rapid, really complex stuff.
But it's not just like turning down the volume on everything else, is it? It feels more active than that.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a simple volume knob at all. Think of it more like a really sophisticated multi-stage filtering process, a whole choreography happening in your head.
Okay, break that down for us. What's the first stage?
So the first layer relies heavily on spatial separation. Your brain is constantly, subconsciously calculating these tiny, tiny differences in when a sound wave hits your left ear versus your right ear, and the difference in loudness, too.
Micro delays, you mean?
Exactly. Micro delays and intensity differences. And using that information, your brain can basically triangulate where the sound is coming from. It lets you sort of point your attention towards the speaker and mentally push sounds from other directions into the background.
Okay, so using the physics of sound waves, that makes sense. But what if the room has terrible acoustics? Lots of echo. Or, maybe worse, the person you need to hear is right next to someone else who's also talking. The spatial cues wouldn't help much then.
Great point. That's when the brain switches gears. It moves from location, location, location to focusing on the quality of the sound itself. This is frequency and timbre separation.
Timbre, like the unique sound of a voice.
Precisely. Your auditory system builds this incredibly detailed acoustic fingerprint for the voice you're trying to follow. It tracks the pitch, the fundamental frequency, the sort of richness or thinness of the voice, specific intonation patterns.
So it locks onto that voice's specific sound signature.
Exactly. And it uses that fingerprint to filter out other voices, even if they're coming from the same direction. It's kind of like picking out a specific violin in an orchestra just by its unique tone, not by where the violinist is sitting.
Okay, this is already impressive, but you mentioned it gets even more interesting.
Oh, yeah. Because the brain doesn't just passively filter the sound that comes in, it goes into overdrive predicting what's coming next.
This involves linguistic cues and predictive processing.
Predictive processing, so guessing words.
In a highly sophisticated way, yes. Once your brain has locked onto the voice acoustically, your higher-level thinking, what we sometimes call top-down processing, jumps in to reconstruct any bits of the speech that got garbled by the noise.
How does it do that?
Well, it instantly draws on your huge mental dictionary, your lexical knowledge, to predict likely words based on the context so far. It uses your understanding of grammatical knowledge or syntax to anticipate The sentence structure, expecting a verb after a noun, that kind of thing.
And maybe the most powerful tool is semantic context. That's your background knowledge, what you know about the topic, about the speaker, about the situation. That helps you infer missing words or figure out ambiguous phrases incredibly fast. Your brain is like this high-speed prediction engine, crucial in noise.
And holding all this together, managing the focus and the prediction, that's where attention and memory come in.
Absolutely. You've got selective attention, which is like that mental spotlight actively pushing away distracting sounds. And then you have working memory. That's the system that kind of holds on to those half-heard bits, that phrase you think you heard just long enough for the next bit of sound to arrive, and either confirm your prediction or make you revise it.
Like buffering a video.
Exactly like buffering. It holds the pieces until the full picture emerges.
Okay, so that's the system in native speakers, running pretty smoothly, mostly subconsciously. Now, the big question, why is this whole intricate process so much harder, so much more demanding for advanced non-native English speakers, even C1 level speakers?
It really boils down to cognitive resources, or maybe efficiency is a better word. For a non-native listener, almost every single stage of that complex process we just described requires more conscious effort, more active mental resources, and that immediately drains the pool of resources available for the actual noise filtering part.
So it starts right at the beginning.
Yeah.
With just identifying the sounds.
Yeah, think about acoustic familiarity. Native speakers are so tuned in to the specific sounds of English, the subtle vowel differences, the rhythm, the typical intonation patterns, that separating voices based on those acoustic fingerprints happens really fast, almost automatically.
But for non-native ears?
For non-native ears, even advanced ones, you might still be actively working to process those subtle phonetic cues, or maybe the rhythm feels less predictable. That slight delay in locking onto the target voice's acoustic profile makes it much harder to filter out the surrounding noise effectively from the get-go.
Okay, so the initial filter is already slower, more effortful, and that leads to what you called increased cognitive load.
Precisely. You, as the C1 learner, are already spending significant mental energy just on the basics of understanding. Figuring out the exact sounds, retrieving the right vocabulary word quickly, parsing the grammar of maybe a complex sentence.
Right, things a native speaker does more automatically.
Exactly. So because you're actively engaged in those core language tasks, you simply have fewer cognitive resources left over for the really demanding jobs of selective attention, actively suppressing noise, and that predictive gap filling we talked about.
It's like trying to run too many heavy programs on a computer at once.
That's a perfect analogy. The system starts to lag, it drops frames, or in this case, it drops words. Your brain just can't keep up with decoding the language and fighting the noise simultaneously at full speed.
And this cognitive load is made even worse because the non-native listener might have less reliable linguistic prediction power, right? If your vocabulary isn't quite as vast, or you're less familiar with certain idioms or complex structures.
Spot on. When the noise inevitably causes the acoustic signal to degrade, maybe a word gets completely masked, the native brain often uses its highly developed prediction model to just fill in the blank almost effortlessly based on context.
But the non-native brain?
If your internal prediction model for English is still developing, or maybe just a fraction slower, you can't rely on it as heavily. You're forced to depend much more on trying to extract meaning from that already damaged, noisy acoustic signal itself.
Which often fails.
And that's why listening in noise can be so incredibly tiring for non-native speakers. It's a constant, high-level cognitive effort that drains your working memory and attentional resources much, much faster. So when we talk about the difficulty of understanding speech in noise, the interference basically comes in two main flavors. They often work together, conspiring against you, making sense of what's said. We'd call these acoustic masking, sometimes called energetic masking, and cognitive masking, or informational masking.
Okay, let's tackle the first one. Acoustic or energetic masking. This sounds like the more straightforward physical type of interference.
It is, fundamentally. It's about the noise physically overwhelming or covering up the speech signal right at the level of your ear, the cochlea and the auditory nerve. It's brute force.
How does that happen mechanically?
The main mechanism is frequency overlap. Think about the different pitches in speech. Certain sounds, especially consonants that carry a lot of meaning, exist in specific higher frequency bands. If the background noise has a lot of energy in those same frequency bands, it literally drowns out the speech sounds.
Like trying to hear a tiny flute melody when a huge bass drum is playing the same note right next to it.
That's a great way to put it. The louder sound just completely obscures the quieter one if they share the same frequency space. Especially those delicate high-frequency consonants like is, tick. They're the first to go.
So if the noise is mostly low frequency, like a deep rumble, it might be less disruptive to those crucial high-frequency speech sounds.
Generally, yes, that's true. But there's a second mechanism involved in acoustic masking, which is simply loudness disparity. This comes down to the basic signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR.
Meaning how loud the speech is compared to the noise.
Exactly. If the background noise is just plain louder than the speech signal, your auditory system might not even be able to detect the speech reliably above the general noise floor. It's just too faint in comparison.
And the impact is, it just makes it physically hard work to even hear the distinct sounds, the phones, the syllables.
Physically arduous, yes. And this affects everyone, native speakers included. But here's the catch for non-native listeners. Research suggests you often need a significantly better SNR to achieve the same level of understanding as a native speaker.
Really? How much better?
Some studies suggest maybe 5, even up to 10 decibels higher SNR, meaning the speech needs to be considerably louder relative to the noise for you to process it comfortably, partly because you have less cognitive reserve to compensate for any masking.
So examples of this kind of energetic masking would be things like constant machine noise, like a vacuum cleaner or a loud fan or engine noise on a plane, noise that doesn't really have meaning itself.
Precisely. Static, humming, roaring is just a physical sound wave blocking the speech signal.
Okay, so that's the physical battle. But then there's the other type, cognitive or informational masking. This sounds like it's more about distraction, messing with your brain's processing.
That's exactly right. This is where the interference happens less at the ear and more within the brain's attention and processing systems. The noise might not physically drown out the speech signal entirely, but it has characteristics that grab your attention or confuse your processing mechanisms.
And what's the worst offender here?
Without a doubt, the most potent form of informational masking is speech-on-speech masking, usually referred to as babble noise.
Other people talking, basically.
Yes. Other human voices competing for your attention are incredibly distracting. Why? Because our brains are fundamentally wired to process speech. When there are multiple conversations happening around you, especially in English, your brain instinctively tries to track them, or at least struggles not to track them.
So it's like your brain keeps getting pulled away from the voice you want to listen to.
Exactly. It creates this intense competition for your cognitive resources, particularly your selective attention. Your brain is working overtime trying to suppress those other voices, and that effort leaves less capacity for understanding the person you're actually talking to. It leads to confusion and burnout really quickly.
Okay, quick question though. What if the background chatter, the babble, is in a language I don't understand at all? Say, people talking rapidly in Mandarin next to me. Is that still informational masking?
Yeah.
My brain would be trying to figure out the meaning right.
That's a really insightful question. You're right, it wouldn't cause linguistic informational masking in the same way because your English processing systems wouldn't be directly competing. However...
There's a however.
There is. Even if you don't understand the language, the sound of speech itself, its complex rhythm, its variable pitch, its intonation is inherently attention-grabbing for the human brain. It's a complex, unpredictable sound source. So while you aren't parsing the meaning, that Mandarin babble is still demanding resources from your attentional system. Your brain still has to actively work to inhibit that distracting input just because it sounds like speech. It's still a cognitive load, just a slightly different flavor of it.
Okay, that makes sense. It's still brain noise, even if it's not language I process.
Mm-hmm.
What about other types of informational masking? You mentioned variable or intermittent noise earlier. Things like phones ringing, doors slamming, sudden bursts of laughter. Why are those often more distracting than a constant, steady noise like a fan?
It's about predictability. Our brains are incredibly good at adapting to steady, predictable background noise. We can often tune out a constant hum after a while. It's called habituation.
Right, you just stop noticing it.
Exactly. But unpredictable sounds that start and stop abruptly trigger what's called the brain's orienting reflex. It's an automatic response. Your auditory system is constantly scanning for changes in the soundscape. A sudden noise forces your selective attention system to disengage from your target speaker, identify the new sound, assess its importance, and then, hopefully, re-engage with the speaker. Each interruption costs processing time and resources.
So the main hit from informational masking is on those higher level brain functions.
Yeah.
Attention, prediction, keeping things straight, and working memory. The brain gets confused about what's signal and what's noise.
You've got it. And this brings us right back to that double whammy for the non-native English speaker. You often need that better signal-to-noise ratio to overcome the physical energetic masking. And at the same time, the extra mental effort you're already putting into processing English means you're much more susceptible to being overwhelmed by informational masking. Especially competing English speech, the cognitive resources just deplete much faster, leading to that feeling of sudden, overwhelming fatigue. Tag 3. Factors shaping comprehension and noise. Okay, so noise is clearly a major challenge. But whether a noisy situation is just difficult versus completely impossible depends on a whole range of factors. They can either make things worse or actually help you out. We can group these into about 4 key categories. Tag 3A, linguistic factors, the language's internal hurdles.
Let's start with challenges baked into the English language itself. Things like connected speech and reductions must be a huge one in noise.
Oh, they're massive. Native English speakers are masters of efficiency, right? We don't always say going to, we say gonna. Want to becomes wanna. We drop sounds, that's elision. We change sounds to match their neighbors' assimilation. Function words like to, of often get reduced to these tiny, weak forms.
Which is already tricky even in quiet.
Exactly. But in a quiet room, as a C1 listener, your brain often expects these reduced forms and fills them in. But add noise, that faint acoustic evidence for the reduced form, the gona, might get completely wiped out by energetic masking. And if your ear is still half listening for the full form, going to, which isn't actually there acoustically, you just miss it. Total blank.
And that difficulty is probably amplified by lexical ambiguity and polysemy. Words sounding alike or having multiple meanings.
Definitely. Think about those minimal pairs with subtle vowel differences like ship versus sheep or live versus leave. Those tiny acoustic cues are incredibly vulnerable to noise. If the noise masks the vowel clarity, your brain might try to hold both possibilities, ship and sheep, in your working memory for a split second.
Trying to figure it out from context later.
Right. But resolving that ambiguity, holding multiple options active while also fighting the noise, that takes up a huge amount of cognitive processing power you probably don't have to spare in that situation. The brain often just drops one possibility, maybe the wrong one.
And what about sentence structure? Syntactic complexity.
Yeah, that's another big drain. When a speaker uses really long sentences with lots of embedded clauses, maybe passive voice, it puts a massive strain on your working memory.
So you have to hold the beginning of the sentence in your head while you process all the middle bits.
All while also actively trying to suppress the background noise. It's too much. You might understand every individual word, but the sheer effort of piecing together the complex grammar under noisy conditions means the overall meaning gets lost. You hit cognitive saturation.
But there's a positive linguistic factor too, right? Vocabulary depth.
Absolutely. This is where you can really make a difference through learning. Having a broad and deep vocabulary, knowing lots of words and idioms, massively boosts your brain's predictive power.
How so?
Well, imagine the speaker says something about the economy, and the word recession gets masked by a sudden noise. If you have a strong vocabulary related to economics, your brain has a much smaller, more probable set of words to guess from. It can likely fill in recession very quickly.
But if your vocab in that area is limited,
then your brain has fewer options to predict from, making it much harder to bridge that acoustic gap. A strong vocabulary essentially gives your brain better tools to work with when the signal quality drops. Tag 3B. Speaker factors. Optimizing the signal source. Okay, moving on from the language itself, let's talk about the speaker. They play a huge role in whether their message cuts through the noise. The most obvious starting point is clarity of articulation.
meaning pronouncing words clearly, not mumbling.
Exactly. But specifically, paying attention to precise pronunciation, especially for consonants.
Why consonants in particular?
Because many consonants, especially sounds like P, T, K, is, are high-frequency sounds. They carry a lot of the information that distinguishes words, but acoustically, they often have less energy than vowels.
So they get easily masked by noise.
They're the first things to disappear. A speaker who makes sure to produce crisp, clear consonants, getting the voicing right for B versus P, making sure there's S sounds are strong, provides a much more robust acoustic signal. It gives the listener's ear more to grab onto amidst the static. Mumbling and noise, forget it. The message is lost instantly.
Okay, clear articulation. What else? Speech rate seems critical too.
Hugely important. Speaking at a moderate, deliberate pace is incredibly helpful. It's not just about making individual sounds clearer, although it does that too. Crucially, it gives the listener's brain those vital extra milliseconds between words to process.
Time to catch up, basically.
Yes, time to finish decoding one word, store it, and get ready for the next one. Rapid-fire speech, especially with lots of connected speech reductions, just collapses those essential processing windows, overwhelming the listener's working memory.
Then there are the basic acoustic properties. Pitch and loudness.
Right. Sometimes a voice with a slightly higher or more distinct pitch can be easier to track against low-frequency background noise. And loudness is key for that signal-to-noise ratio we talked about. The speaker needs to project confidently, aiming for a volume that's comfortably above the noise level, but without actually shouting. Shouting can distort the voice and actually make it harder to understand sometimes.
And finally, under speaker factors, accent and familiarity. This isn't about good or bad accents, is it?
Not at all. It's purely about cognitive load. If you, the listener, encounter an accent you're not very familiar with, your brain has to work harder just to map the sounds you're hearing onto the English sounds you know.
So you're decoding the accent and the meaning and fighting the noise.
Exactly. It's another layer of processing. And when you combine that extra effort with the already high demands of listening and noise, it can quickly push you over your cognitive limit. Familiarity breeds efficiency here. The more exposure you have to an accent, the less effort it takes to understand it, even in noise. Hashtag tag 3C, listener factors, the receiver's state.
Okay, category 3. Factors related to the listener themselves, their own state and abilities. And the most fundamental one has to be hearing acuity, right?
Non-negotiable. Exactly. Working memory is often the bottleneck. When it gets overloaded by too much noise or too much complexity, that's when you lose the thread of the conversation completely.
Which leads perfectly into the impact of fatigue and stress. Being tired or anxious must make this much harder.
Dramatically so. When you're physically exhausted or feeling stressed or anxious, your brain literally diverts resources away from your executive functions. The parts responsible for complex tasks like selective attention, planning, and processing speed.
So stress steals the brain power needed for noise filtering.
Essentially, yes. Feeling overwhelmed makes it physically harder to focus and process information effectively. Your ability to cope with noisy environments often plummets when you're tired or stressed.
Okay, but on a more positive note, there's the power of visual cues, using your eyes to help your ears.
A massive help. When the sound signal is unreliable because of noise, your brain automatically tries to get information from other senses, especially vision. Lip reading, even if you've never formally learned it, can provide vital clues.
Like distinguishing P and D sounds, which look different on the lips.
Exactly. P, B, M look similar, but F and V, lip to teeth, look very different from the tongue between teeth. Your brain picks up on these subtle visual distinctions. Plus, watching the speaker's facial expressions gives you context, their emotional state, emphasis reinforcing the message your ears might be struggling to catch. Hashtag tag 32. Environmental factors. The space itself. Right, the last category is the environment itself, the physical space and the nature of the noise. We've already established the type of noise matters hugely. Competing speech, babble, is generally the hardest work for the brain.
Because of that informational masking, the cognitive distraction?
Precisely. Whereas steady-state noise, like a fan, is more about energetic masking, just physically covering the sound. And intermittent noise, like construction sounds, is highly distracting because it constantly breaks your attention.
And we keep coming back to the signal-to-noise ratio, SNR, the simple loudness comparison.
It's fundamental. You need the speech signal to be sufficiently louder than the background noise. And remember, as a non-native listener, you likely need a higher SNR, a bigger loudness difference than a native speaker does to achieve comfortable understanding. You need that clearer signal to compensate for the extra processing work your brain is doing.
And finally, the often overlooked factor, the room's acoustics and reverberation. Echoes.
Reverberation, the silent killer, as you called it. Especially bad for a fast-paced language like English. In rooms with lots of hard surfaces, tiles, glass, high ceilings, sound waves bounce around.
Creating echoes that overlap.
Exactly. It creates this smearing effect. The sound energy from the words someone just said hangs around and overlaps with the sound of the next word they're saying. This blurs the boundaries between words, making it incredibly difficult for your brain to segment the speech stream accurately. Crisp speech turns into this muddy, overlapping mess,
Okay, that's a really thorough breakdown of why it's so difficult. We understand the masking, the cognitive load, all the factors.
Yeah.
Now let's pivot. What can you, the listener, actively do to fight back and reclaim that signal? Let's get into actionable strategies. #tag 4A, preemptive environmental control.
Absolutely. The first line of defense is trying to control the environment before the conversation even starts, if possible. Think strategic positioning.
Getting physically closer to the speaker.
Yes, sound intensity drops off rapidly with distance. It's the inverse square law. So minimize the distance to the person you need to hear. That boosts the S in your SNR. Conversely, maximize your distance from major noise sources. Don't sit right next to the speakers pumping out music or the clattering kitchen doors.
And if you're stuck in one of those echoey, hard surface rooms,
don't just accept it. Actively seek out spots that minimize reverberation. Look for areas with soft furnishings, carpets, curtains, upholstered chairs. Even large potted plants can help absorb sound. Avoid clustering in open, tiled areas or near large glass windows if you need to have a serious conversation. It's basic physics, but it makes a real difference.
and critically, always try to maintain a clear line of sight to the speaker.
Essential. If the sound quality is likely to be poor, you absolutely need to maximize the information you can get from visual cues, lip reading, facial expressions. Don't be afraid to subtly shift your position or even politely ask, mind if I move here so I can see you better?
Good point.
Yeah.
And we should quickly mention technology and hearing health again here.
Definitely. For listening to things like lectures or, well, this deep dive in a noisy place, good noise-canceling headphones can be incredibly effective at reducing that steady background energetic masking. And seriously, treat hearing checks as preventative maintenance. An undetected mild hearing loss makes every noisy situation 10 times harder. Get checked if you suspect anything. #tag 4B. Active engagement during conversation.
Okay, so you've positioned yourself as best you can. Now the conversation starts. This is where you need to actively engage, right? Like intense focus.
You really do. You have to consciously deploy that mental spotlight we talked about. Make a deliberate effort to focus on the speaker and mentally push the background noise away. Maintaining steady eye contact helps enormously here. It signals to the speaker where your attention is, and it helps lock your own focus.
And while you're looking, actively leverage those visual cues. Don't just passively watch.
Right. Pay attention to mouth shapes, especially for consonants. Watch the jaw movements. Notice the speaker's expressions. Are they joking? Are they serious? Are they emphasizing a point? All this visual data helps your brain confirm or guess at things the noise might have obscured in the sound signal.
And what about when you inevitably miss a word or phrase? Panic.
No, definitely not panic. That just increases stress and makes things worse. Instead, rely on contextual prediction. Use the words you did understand, plus your knowledge of the topic, the speaker, and the situation to make an educated guess about what was missed. Keep the conversation flowing in your mind. Don't get bogged down on that one lost word. Try to infer it from what comes next.
Okay, but sometimes prediction isn't enough. You genuinely need clarification. Many learners feel awkward about asking, though.
They do, but it's crucial to get over that. Using clarification strategies effectively is a vital skill, not a sign of weakness. Nodding along when you haven't understood is a fast track to serious miscommunication.
So what are some good ways to ask? Not just what or huh.
Exactly. Be specific if you can. Try things like, sorry, it's quite loud. Could you say that last part again? Or even better, pinpoint the problem. What was that word you said right after budget?
Or
Try confirming your understanding. Okay, so if I heard correctly, you're suggesting we postpone the meeting. That forces a clear confirmation or correction.
or even just directly signaling the problem. I'm finding it a bit hard to follow with the noise. Could we maybe slow down slightly?
Perfect. Be polite, but be direct. It helps everyone in the long run. #tag 4C, long-term cognitive and linguistic training.
Okay, those are great in-the-moment tactics. But what about building up more fundamental resilience over time? Long-term training.
Yes, this is about strengthening the underlying skills. One key area is to really enhance your phonological awareness for English. Train your ear for the realities of fast, connected speech.
How can you do that?
Well, techniques like shadowing can be fantastic. That's where you listen to a native speaker and try to mimic their rhythm, their intonation, their connected speech patterns, almost simultaneously. It really tunes your ear and your own production to the natural flow.
Like learning the melody of the language.
Exactly. And combine that with things like transcription practice, taking short audio clips of natural, maybe slightly fast or informal speech, and trying to write down exactly what you hear, including the reductions and blends. It forces you to actively decode those blurry bits.
And what about building that mental hardware? Can you actually strengthen working memory?
There's evidence you can improve it with targeted practice, things like dual task exercises where you have to hold information in mind while doing something else, or specific memory training games that require sustained attention and manipulation of information. A stronger working memory gives you more buffer space to handle complex information in noise.
Makes sense. And you mentioned this before, the importance of practicing thinking in English.
Yes. That habit many learners have of mentally translating everything back to their native language and then back again. It eats up so much cognitive energy you desperately need for filtering noise and understanding the English directly. The more you can reduce that internal translation step, the more processing power you free up for the actual task at hand.
So immerse yourself, try to make English your default internal monologue as much as possible.
That's the goal. And finally, deliberate practice in noise. Don't always avoid noisy situations. Gradually expose yourself. Try listening to a podcast on the bus. Try having a low-stakes chat in a moderately busy cafe. Build up your tolerance and your brain's ability to filter noise, like training a muscle.
Okay, so we've armed the listener. But communication is a two-way street, right? The speaker has a massive role to play, especially if they know they're talking to a non-native speaker or if they're simply in a challenging environment. They need to optimize how they deliver the message. #TAG5A. Optimizing vocal delivery.
Right. It starts with how they actually speak. Number one is probably clearer articulation. Absolutely. As the speaker, you need to make a conscious effort to articulate clearly and precisely. Avoid excessive mumbling or running words together too much. Think about slightly over-articulating, just a touch, especially the endings of words and those crucial consonant sounds. Not in a patronizing way, just clean.
Crisp word boundaries.
Exactly. And manage your moderate rate. Most of us speak faster than we think, especially native speakers talking to each other. When noise is a factor or you're speaking to a non-native listener, consciously slow down your pace. Not painfully slow, but deliberate.
Giving the listener that crucial processing time between words.
Yes, and ensure appropriate volume. You need to project your voice so it's clearly audible above the background noise, aiming for that good SNR, but resist the urge to just shout. Shouting distorts your voice and doesn't always help intelligibility. Aim for confident projection.
And use pauses effectively, strategic pauses.
Vital. Don't just talk in one long stream. Insert brief, natural pauses between key ideas or after complex sentences. This gives the listener's brain a moment to catch up, process the information chunk, and get ready for the next bit. It prevents cognitive overload. Think of pauses as punctuation for the ears. #TAG5B. Optimizing linguistic content. Beyond how you speak, what you say also matters. Speakers should aim for simpler structures in noisy environments.
Meaning shorter sentences. Active voice instead of passive. Fewer complicated clauses nested inside each other.
Precisely. Keep the grammar relatively straightforward. This reduces the parsing load on the listener, freeing up their mental resources to deal with the noise and the core meaning.
And choose your words carefully. Use familiar vocabulary.
Definitely. Avoid unnecessary jargon, overly technical terms, or obscure words if simpler, more common alternatives exist. High-frequency words are easier for the listener's predictive brain to latch onto, especially when the acoustic signal is degraded.
Which also means probably avoiding excessive idioms and slang.
Oh, absolutely. Non-literal language is really tough in noise. The listener has to decode the words and then perform an extra mental step to figure out the intended figurative meaning. It's just adding unnecessary cognitive load. Stick to more literal language when clarity is paramount.
Good tip. And to help the listener's prediction skills, speakers should provide context up front.
Yes. Set the stage briefly. Say something like, okay, I want to tell you about the 3 main issues we found, or let's talk about the plan for next week. This activates the listener's relevant background knowledge and expectations, making it much easier for them to anticipate the content and fill in any gaps caused by noise.
And don't be afraid to repeat and rephrase key points.
Not at all. If something is really important, say it again, perhaps using slightly different words. This gives the listener multiple opportunities, multiple acoustic shots at catching the essential message. Redundancy can be your friend in noisy situations. #5C. Optimizing nonverbal support and interaction.
Okay, final area for speakers. the interaction itself, the nonverbal side. Maintaining eye contact seems obvious but important.
Crucial. It helps the listener focus their attention, makes the interaction feel more connected, and, as we discussed, provides those vital visual cues for lip reading and expression.
And speakers should also use clear expressions and gestures.
Yeah. Natural, clear body language gestures that reinforce your point, facial expressions that match your tone provides another layer of information, complementing the spoken words and helping to clarify meaning when the audio channel is compromised.
And perhaps the most helpful thing a speaker can do interactively is to proactively check for understanding.
Absolutely. Don't just steamroll ahead assuming the listener is following. Pause periodically and ask simple, encouraging questions like, is that making sense so far? Or, are you with me on the timeline? Or, any questions about that part? This gives the listener a low-pressure opportunity to signal if they're lost before they miss a huge chunk of information.
It avoids that awkward moment much later where they have to admit they zoned out 10 minutes ago.
Exactly. And underpinning all of this is the need for the speaker to be patient and encouraging. Remember, listening in noise, especially in a second language, is hard work. A supportive, understanding attitude from the speaker lowers the listener's anxiety. And as we know, lower anxiety means more cognitive resources available for the actual listening task. Patience really helps. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay. So putting it all together, what we've really decoded today is that understanding English in noise isn't just one problem. It's this complex interplay. You've got the physical sound interference, that energetic masking.
Right. The sonic wall.
And then you've got the mental distraction, the informational masking, especially from other voices. It's a formidable challenge.
It really is. But the key takeaway, I think, is that mastering this is possible. It's not about finding perfectly quiet places all the time that's unrealistic. It's about building that cognitive resilience, developing the skills, using the strategies for both listening and speaking.
That dual approach, listener and speaker working together.
Exactly. When you start applying these techniques, whether it's consciously choosing where to sit or deliberately slowing your speech or actively using visual cues, you're not just coping with noise, you're honing a really powerful communication skill. You're learning to pull that clear signal out of the static.
Transforming a frustrating barrier into, well, almost a superpower for connecting clearly, even when the environment is working against you.
That's a great way to put it. Deeper connections, clearer understanding, even in the midst of chaos.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into decoding English speech in noisy environments. We really hope these insights and strategies help you navigate those challenging soundscapes more effectively.
Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hello. Welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, 1 Hour C1 Advanced English Vocabulary Learning Podcast. The first topic name is Recognizing Sarcasm and Irony in Spoken English. Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. We are tackling something, perhaps one of the most elusive yet really essential elements of C1 advanced comprehension. And that's recognizing when someone is saying one thing, but, meaning the opposite. This isn't just some linguistic puzzle. It's more like a cultural litmus test, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It goes way beyond just the words on the page or the words you hear.
Let's maybe start with a scenario, something we can all kind of picture. Imagine you're trying to catch a cab, right? Middle of a huge rush hour downpour.
Okay, yeah. Stressful already.
Exactly. You finally get in, you're soaked, and the driver immediately slams on the brakes because traffic's just stopped.
Right.
Dead halt. And the radio, just static.
Oh, the worst.
So the driver sighs, glances back at you, maybe in the mirror, and says, oh, this is just perfect.
Phrasing. Perfect.
Now, if you're, let's say, newer to the natural flow of spoken English, you might actually think, oh, okay, he's happy.
You might take it literally.
Yeah.
But of course, he isn't pleased at all.
Not even slightly. He's communicating like profound frustration, and that complete subtle shift in meaning, it relies totally on the tone, the context. That's really the core mission of this deep dive today.
And what's truly fascinating, I think, is that mastering sarcasm and irony, that's often the point where a language learner really shifts. They go from just being proficient, knowing the grammar and vocab, to being genuinely fluent. Because it demands you move beyond just the nuts and bolts of language.
So it's not just syntax and vocabulary lists anymore.
Not at all. It demands this holistic understanding. You need to get prosody, the rhythm, the music of the language, plus nonverbal cues, shared knowledge, and really fundamentally cultural norms. When that driver says perfect, they're starting this sophisticated, non-literal dialogue.
A dialogue that needs a leap from the listener.
Exactly. An inferential leap. If you miss that perfect actually means miserable, you haven't just missed a word.
No.
You've missed the whole point of the interaction. You've missed the emotional landscape underneath.
So today, we're not just going to define terms. We're aiming to help you build a more sophisticated sarcasm radar, let's call it.
Good term.
We'll start by, drawing a line between broad irony and its sharper cousin, sarcasm.
Which can be quite cutting sometimes.
Definitely. Then we'll explore why it's actually so hard for our brains to detect this stuff in real time, the cognitive hurdles.
Yeah, the mental gymnastics involved.
And we'll spend a good chunk of time really dissecting the specific clues, linguistic ones, physical ones that give the game away.
The things that betray the true intent. This is where we go beyond the textbook definitions, really.
Right. Our goal is to empower you, the C1 learner listening right now, to not just understand when irony or sarcasm is happening, but to understand how it's being signaled.
So you can navigate these, let's face it, often perplexing, non-literal conversations with a bit more confidence.
Exactly. In advanced spoken English. Okay, let's start by getting our terms straight, because irony and sarcasm, they get mixed up all the time, don't they?
Constantly, even by native speakers.
Yeah.
But yeah, for an advanced understanding, we need a bit more precision.
So let's start with the big one, irony, the broader concept.
Right. Irony, at its absolute base level, is all about incongruity.
Incongruity, meaning?
Meaning a clash, a contrast between what you expect to happen or what seems appropriate and what actually does happen or what is actually said. It's a really old, very versatile rhetorical tool.
Okay. And this broad idea, irony, it breaks down into different types, right?
It does. We often talk about situational irony first. That's about events, outcomes in the real world.
Give us an example of that.
Sure. Situational irony is like, well, the classic is a fire station burning down.
Right. The one place you expect to be safe from fire.
Exactly. Or maybe you buy this super expensive top-of-the-line home security system, and the first thing it does is malfunction and lock you out of your own house. The expectation security access is the complete opposite of the result. You're stuck outside.
Okay, that makes sense. Then there's dramatic irony. We see that a lot in stories, plays, films.
Yes, dramatic irony hinges on a knowledge gap. The audience knows something crucial that a character in the story doesn't.
Like in?
Well, think Romeo and Juliet. When Romeo finds Juliet and thinks she's dead,
oh, right,
he kills himself.
Yeah.
But we, the audience, know she's just taken a sleeping potion. She's about to wake up any second.
Ah, yeah. Agonizing.
That terrible clash between his belief and our knowledge of the reality, that's dramatic irony.
Right.
Creates huge suspense, tension.
Got it. But for understanding conversation, the really key one is verbal irony.
This is the one we wrestle with in spoken English. Verbal irony is purely linguistic. It happens when a speaker says something, but the intended meaning is actually the opposite of the literal words they used.
So back to our taxi driver in the rain.
Perfect example. Stuck in that horrific traffic jam, rain pouring down, static on the radio, and he says, "This is absolutely thrilling."
Thrilling. Clearly not.
Clearly not. The literal word is positive, thrilling. Yeah. But the context, the delay, the stress, the rain makes the intended meaning totally obvious. This is awful, tedious, stressful. The words clash with the reality.
Okay, so verbal irony is saying the opposite of what you mean. Simple enough, maybe. But where does sarcasm fit in? Are they just the same thing?
No, not quite. And this is a crucial distinction for C1 level. Sarcasm is a type of verbal irony, a specific application of it.
So all sarcasm uses verbal irony.
But not all verbal irony is sarcasm.
Yes.
Yes. The absolute key difference of the thing you need to grasp is the speaker's intent and their emotional tone.
The purpose behind it. Why are they saying the opposite?
That's the heart of it. Verbal irony sometimes can be quite neutral, maybe detached, just pointing out an absurdity, maybe inviting you to share a little chuckle at the situation.
Sure.
Sarcasm, though. Sarcasm is rarely neutral. Its main goal, almost always, is to mock or criticize or express contempt, maybe even to wound someone, verbally speaking.
So it's got a bite to it.
It really does. It's often humor, sure, but it's humor used like a tool, maybe even a weapon sometimes. It's loaded with a negative judgment.
Can we have an example to make that distinction really clear?
Let's try. Okay, say I accidentally knock my own glass over, spill water everywhere, and I sigh and say, well, that was graceful.
Okay, you're making fun of yourself.
Right. It's verbal irony. I mean, it wasn't graceful, but it's self-deprecating. Pretty harmless. Now, imagine someone cuts me off dangerously in traffic, and I lean out the window and shout, wow, nice driving. You must have learned from a real pro.
Okay, still verbal irony, you mean the driving was terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now, the intent isn't just to point out a contrast. It's dripping with contempt. It's mockery aimed squarely at their driving skill.
Ah, I see. That direct critical aim.
That critical, often disdainful attitude pushes it firmly into sarcasm. Sarcasm usually has a clear target, person, their action, an idea, a situation the speaker wants to ridicule.
So verbal irony highlights absurdity. Sarcasm adds that layer of criticism or mockery.
You've got it. That intent is the key.
Okay, understanding the definitions is one thing. Spotting it live, in a fast conversation, that's a whole different ballgame.
It really is.
So why is it so tough? Why does our brain struggle so much with sarcasm?
Well, the core problem is that it relies entirely on implied meaning. Our brains are kind of wired for efficiency, for literal interpretation first. It's faster.
Like a default setting.
Pretty much. Sarcasm forces the listener to override that default, to abandon efficiency, and go through this really complex series of mental steps. And that ramps up the cognitive load significantly.
Cognitive load. Sounds like it takes a lot of mental energy. Can you walk us through that process step by step? How demanding is it?
It's incredibly demanding, especially if you're listening in a language that isn't your first, where just basic decoding is already taking up resources. We could think of it as maybe 4 key steps happening super fast.
Okay, step 1.
First, you have to decode the literal meaning. You hear the words, "That's fantastic." Your brain processes the standard positive meaning of fantastic. Straightforward enough.
Step 2.
Second, you must detect an incongruity, a clash. Your brain has to compare that positive word fantastic with all the other signals it's getting.
Like the situation, the tone of voice.
Exactly. The speaker's flat tone, maybe a frown, the context you both know is terrible, the coffee spill, the traffic jam. If the positive word clashes violently with this negative reality, your brain flags it. Hold on, something's not right here.
Okay, clash detected. What's next? This sounds like the hard part.
It is. Step 3 is you have to infer the intended non-literal meaning. Your brain has to basically guess, okay, if the literal meaning doesn't fit, what did they actually mean? Usually it flips to the opposite.
So fantastic must mean terrible.
Right. And this requires activating what psychologists sometimes call theory of mind. You're trying to figure out the speaker's true thoughts or feelings, their mental state. Big cognitive step.
And the final step.
Fourth, you just have to discard the literal meaning. You actively push aside fantastic positive and lock in the inferred meaning. Terrible, negative.
Wow. Decode, detect clash, infer opposite, discard original, all in a split second during a conversation.
And if that process takes even slightly too long,
Yeah.
you're lost. The conversation has moved on.
It sounds like trying to juggle 4 balls while, I don't know, translating in your head at the same time.
That's a really good analogy. If you're already using most of your mental bandwidth just to understand the basic words and grammar in English,
Yeah.
adding this complex inference task on top can just overload the system. That processing lag is a huge barrier for learners.
And you mentioned context earlier. This whole process seems incredibly dependent on it.
Totally. Extreme context dependency. The meaning is like a chameleon. It changes entirely based on the situation.
Can you give an example where missing the context just kills the irony?
Sure. Imagine 2 colleagues chatting. One says, "Hey, did you hear Mr. Smith's finally rolling out that new software?" The other one rolls their eyes dramatically and says, "Oh, wonderful."
Okay.
Now, if you, the listener, just joined the team and missed the last 3 meetings where everyone discussed how Mr. Smith's previous software rollouts were complete disasters.
You lack the shared knowledge.
Exactly. You have no frame of reference for why wonderful might not be wonderful. You take it literally. You think, oh, good news.
Yeah.
The entire ironic meaning just evaporates without that shared history.
So inside jokes, previous conversations, even just general knowledge about the person, it's all vital.
Crucial. Which makes it really tough for newcomers to any group or culture. They just haven't built up that shared context yet.
What also makes it hard, I think, is that there aren't always clear signs. Like there's no official sarcasm font in spoken language.
That's a great point. The absence of clear linguistic markers is a real challenge. We don't have a specific sound or a guaranteed inflection that means warning, sarcasm ahead.
So how is it signaled then?
It's usually a combination of subtle things, a slight change in pitch, maybe a facial micro-expression, a tiny pause. It's like a constellation of small cues, not one big flashing light.
And if you're busy focusing on just understanding the words,
You can easily miss 1 or 2 of those subtle cues.
Yeah.
And if you only catch one, the signal might be too ambiguous. Your brain stalls, unsure whether to make the ironic leap or not.
And finally, we have to talk about cultural variations. Sarcasm isn't used or understood the same way everywhere, is it?
Not at all. This is huge. Think about cultures that value very direct communication versus those that rely more on indirectness, on reading between the lines.
Okay.
In some cultures, particularly those that value politeness and indirectness, sarcasm can be a very sharp but subtle way to criticize or comment socially without being overtly confrontational.
But in other cultures?
In cultures where communication tends to be very literal and direct, sarcasm might be much rarer. And when it is used, it might come across as overly harsh or just confusing. People might not even register it as irony. They might just think it's rude.
So for a learner, it's not just about hearing the tone change.
No, it's also about learning the cultural rules. When is a sarcastic comment funny banter between friends? And when does that same comment cross a line and become offensive?
That adds another whole layer of difficulty and potential anxiety.
Absolutely. Judging the intent correctly is deeply tied to cultural understanding.
All right, let's get practical. If the words themselves are often misleading, we need to tune into how they're being said. This is our linguistic toolkit. And the absolute star player here has to be prosody, right?
Without a doubt. Prosody, the music of speech, the tone, the pitch, the rhythm, the volume. It carries so much of the non-literal meaning. It's often the biggest giveaway that the speaker doesn't mean what they're literally saying.
Okay, let's break down those sound clues. How about using a monotone or flat effect? How does that signal irony?
Well, it works through contrast. Normally, if someone says something exciting or positive, like, that was the most amazing party, you expect their voice to have energy, right? Higher pitch, maybe louder or faster.
Sure, enthusiasm.
Exactly. But if they say those same positive words, that was the most amazing party, in a completely flat, robotic, uninterested voice.
Like they're reading a shopping list.
Precisely. That massive mismatch between the emotional words and the dead delivery creates this vacuum. Your brain detects the lack of expected emotion and thinks, okay, they definitely didn't mean amazing. The flatness signals the opposite.
Interesting. And the reverse can also be true, right? An exaggerated tone.
Yes. Over-the-top emotion is just as effective. Imagine something truly awful happens. Maybe someone gets fired. And they say, with this ridiculously cheerful, sing-songy, unnaturally high-pitched voice, oh, I'm just thrilled about this opportunity.
Way too cheerful for the situation.
Totally. The excessive, almost theatrical bubbliness clashes so obviously with the grim reality that you know it's irony. The performance itself signals the non-literal meaning.
I've also noticed sometimes people slow right down when they're being sarcastic, a slower speech rate.
Yes, that's very deliberate. Slowing down gives each word this careful, almost heavy emphasis. They might drag out the vowels, pause between words.
Right.
Like, well, that was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
That slow pace forces you to process each word, highlighting the absurdity or the speaker's disagreement with the literal meaning. It's like putting the ironic word under a microscope.
And probably the most common one we hear is emphatic stress, right? Putting extra force on a specific word.
Definitely one of the clearest signals. The key is which word gets the stress. It almost always lands on the word whose meaning is intended to be flipped.
So if someone says, oh, that movie was fantastic, stressing fantastic.
And you know they actually hated it, or the context implies it was bad, that extra stress on the positive adjective acts like a big flashing sign saying, warning, reverse this word. Listen especially for stress on adjectives, adverbs, sometimes verbs, words that carry judgment or description.
Are there other sound clues we should listen for?
Yeah, a few others. Sometimes you might hear a sudden drop in pitch, like the speaker adopts a deeper, mock-serious voice, which contrasts with silly words. Or they might use dramatic pauses right before the ironic statement, building a little tension. Even an overly polite or excessively formal tone, when the situation is casual, can signal irony.
Okay, so that's the sound. What about the actual words themselves, the lexical clues?
Right, word choice is still important even if the meaning is flipped. Often it's about using words that clearly don't match reality.
Like hyperbole, exaggeration.
Hyperbole is a classic. If someone says, after you ask them to do one small thing, oh, sure, pile it on. I've only got a million other things to do.
They don't literally have a million things.
Of course not. The extreme exaggeration isn't meant literally. It's a vehicle for their feeling of being overwhelmed or annoyed. That's the sarcastic message hidden in the hyperbole.
And the opposite works too. Understatement.
Oh, understatement can be incredibly ironic, often quite dryly witty. Describing, say, a total hurricane disaster that flattened houses as, we had a bit of weather last night. a bit of weather.
The sheer inadequacy of the description compared to the reality is powerfully ironic. It downplays something huge, often to create a humorous or stoic effect.
We also see just plain contradictory words, right? Using positive words for obviously negative things.
All the time. Someone messes up badly, and their colleague says, perfect. Just perfect. Or you're describing a terrible experience, and someone responds, excellent. Sounds like you had fun.
Clearly not excellent.
Clearly not. The positive word becomes a stand-in for the negative reality. It's a very common lexical cue.
And for learners, probably very useful to just learn some stock sarcastic phrases that are almost always ironic.
Absolutely essential. Things like, yeah, right, often said with disbelief, or tell me something I don't know, or even just a drawn-out no, really, when someone states the obvious.
Like, you don't say.
Exactly. Knowing these fixed expressions saves you having to analyze the prosody every single time. They're like ironic shortcuts.
Okay, quickly, are there any syntactic cues? Clues in the sentence structure. Yes, rhetorical questions are a big one. They're phrase-like questions, but they're not seeking answers. They're making a statement, usually the opposite of the literal question.
Like, could this possibly get any worse?
Precisely. The intended meaning is, this is already incredibly bad and probably will get worse. The question form is just the ironic delivery mechanism. Also, sometimes the strategic use of adverbs like obviously or clearly when the situation is actually confusing or wrong adds an ironic layer. Well, obviously that's the right way to do it, said about a clear mistake.
Got it. Lots of clues there, both in sound and word choice. Okay, so we've covered the voice, the words, but sometimes maybe the speaker's tone is kind of ambiguous or you miss the verbal cue. That's where the silent signals come in, right? The visual stuff.
Absolutely. Nonverbal cues, facial expressions, body language, they run in parallel with the verbal channel. And often, especially for language learners who might be focusing hard on just decoding the words.
Yeah.
The visual channel provides that extra confirmation. It could be the deciding factor that tells you, okay, that was sarcasm.
So let's start with the face. What are the really common telling facial expressions to watch out for?
Well, the undisputed champion has to be the eye roll.
The classic.
It's pretty much universal, isn't it? That quick upward flick of the eyes just screams exasperation, disdain, or I can't believe that you just said that. It's like a nonverbal punctuation mark saying, rejecting the previous statement.
Hard to miss that one. What else?
Look for raised eyebrows. Not in surprise, but that deliberate, slightly slower arching. It often signals skepticism, like, really? Are you sure about that? It questions the truth or appropriateness of what was just said.
Okay. Now, what about the opposite? A complete lack of expression. The deadpan face. That must be confusing.
The deadpan is definitely tricky. It's when someone delivers words that should be emotional, maybe really positive or really negative, with a completely blank, neutral face. Like saying, I'm having the absolute time of my life while looking bored.
So how do you tell if it's intentional deadpan irony versus someone just being shy or, actually bored?
The key is the contrast with the words. If the words themselves are highly emotional or extreme, this is the most exciting thing ever. But the face shows absolutely zero corresponding emotion. That mismatch is a strong indicator of intentional, ironic deadpan. You check the line text.
Got it. Are there any more explicit facial signals?
Yes, simpler ones. A wink is often a very clear, almost playful signal saying, hey, I'm not being totally serious here. We share some secret understanding.
A bit conspiratorial.
Exactly. And a smirk, that little one-sided, often kind of smug or contemptuous half smile, usually signals that the speaker knows something you don't, or knows that the reality contradicts their words. They're enjoying the irony.
Okay, moving beyond the face to body language, what kind of broader physical signs might give away the irony?
Sometimes you see exaggerated gestures, like someone saying, yes, absolutely, while doing a very slow, deliberate head shake, no.
That direct contradiction.
Or maybe a big dramatic shrug while saying something like, oh, I'm sure it will all work out fine, conveying a sarcastic sense of hopelessness. But honestly, the most critical overall signal from body language is the lack of congruence.
Lack of congruence. Explain that. Why is that the ultimate visual clue?
Congruence just means consistency. All the signals match up. If someone is genuinely happy, their words are positive, their tone is warm, their face is smiling, their body is relaxed and open.
Makes sense.
Lack of congruence is when those channels send contradictory messages. The words say, I'm so excited for this meeting, but the tone is flat, the face is frowning, the arms are crossed tightly, maybe they're shifting their weight nervously.
So the body is saying stress or discomfort while the words say happy.
Precisely. And our brains are actually hardwired to trust the nonverbal, signals, the tension, the tone, more than the literal words when there's a clash. The physical discomfort overrides the positive language.
So positive words plus negative body language, huge red flag for irony or sarcasm.
It's a very strong indicator. Which brings us nicely to the absolute final check, the contextual mismatch. Does the statement just fundamentally clash with reality?
This feels like the ultimate test, doesn't it?
It often is. Sometimes the incompatibility between what's said and the objective, observable situation is so stark, it's the first and loudest signal. Like looking at a torrential downpour and saying, "What a beautiful day for a picnic."
Yeah, undeniable clash.
Or seeing someone who clearly hasn't moved from the sofa all morning and calling them a real dynamo. The words just make no sense against the visual evidence.
We also need to check against what we know about the speaker, right? Their beliefs.
Crucial. Incongruity with the speaker's known beliefs or personality. If your friend absolutely despises, say, modern art, and they're standing in front of an abstract sculpture saying, "Wow, this is truly inspiring, I feel so moved,"
You know they're being ironic.
you know they probably mean the opposite because it clashes with their established views. Their personality provides the context.
And you mentioned this before, but the relationship status is key context too.
Absolutely critical for judging intent. Playful sarcasm between close friends often builds rapport. It's a shared way of looking at the world, maybe gently mocking something together.
But from a stranger,
That exact same sarcastic remark from a stranger, or maybe a boss, could feel aggressive, rude, or genuinely insulting because you don't have that foundation of trust and shared understanding. The relationship dictates how the irony lands.
so always check the words against the tone, the face, the body, the situation, the speaker's beliefs, and your relationship. Wow, no wonder it's tricky.
It's a multi-layered decoding process for sure.
Okay, so we've laid out all these cues: vocal, lexical, visual, contextual. But for you, our C1 listener, putting it all together in real time is extra challenging. You're often juggling several things at once.
That's right. Language acquisition itself, cultural adaptation, plus this heavy cognitive load of detecting irony. It's like a triple threat.
Let's unpack those specific hurdles. We touched on prosody, the sound. Learners often just don't have the mental bandwidth left over to track those subtle tone shifts, do they?
It's a major issue. That limited exposure to nuanced prosody means your ear, as a non-native speaker, might not yet be automatically tuned to the specific dips in pitch or the changes in pace that signal irony to a native speaker.
Why not?
Because, understandably, you're probably dedicating, say, 80% of your cognitive resources just to identifying the words themselves and figuring out the basic grammar. What do they just say? What does that word mean?
Right, survival mode first.
Exactly. There's often just not enough processing power left over to simultaneously analyze the subtle musicality of the speech, the prosody, which carries the ironic meaning.
And that leads directly to the big trap, taking things literally because you miss the sound cues, which connects to insufficient lexical and idiomatic knowledge.
This is a huge one. Think about culturally specific idioms that are often used sarcastically. A famous example, especially in the American South, is "bless your heart."
Ah, yes. Sounds nice, doesn't it?
The words themselves, bless, heart, seem purely kind, positive, but depending on the context and tone, may be said with a slight pitying look or an overly sweet voice.
It can be quite cutting.
It can be devastatingly sarcastic. It can imply anything from "you're sweet but incredibly naive" to "you're just plain foolish, but I'm too polite to say so directly." It's passive aggression wrapped in seeming kindness.
Wow. And if you don't know that specific cultural usage,
You completely miss the intended sting. You take the blessing at face value. The irony is totally invisible because it relies on that shared cultural understanding of the phrase's potential sarcastic use.
it's not just idioms either. You mentioned hyperbole earlier. Learners might not get the exaggeration range.
Right. They might lack that intuitive feel for what counts as normal exaggeration versus what's so extreme. It must be ironic. Someone says, "I waited an eternity for that bus." A learner might think, "Wow, a really long time," rather than recognizing it as just an ironic way of saying the wait was annoyingly long.
Yeah.
Their calibration for hyperbole isn't there yet.
Which brings us to the absence of shared cultural context. Sarcasm so often plays on things everyone knows.
Precisely. Irony loves to violate unspoken cultural norms or reference shared knowledge. Recent news, popular TV shows, common social annoyances, local politics.
It's like complaining about the weather in a typically British way.
Exactly. Or making an ironic comment about a politician's latest gaffe. If you, the listener, don't know the expected norm, for example, how one should dress to meet the queen, or aren't aware of the specific event being referenced, the ironic comment that violates that norm or references that event just floats by. It has no anchor.
And the consequence isn't just misunderstanding, it can be offense, right?
Definitely. You might misinterpret playful teasing sarcasm as genuine criticism, which can damage relationships. Or conversely, you might try to use sarcasm yourself, but get the context wrong and end up sounding rude or inappropriate unintentionally.
And we keep circling back to the sheer mental effort involved, the higher cognitive load and processing lag.
It's always there. Simply understanding sentences in a non-native language takes more brain power. That baseline effort leaves fewer resources available for the complex, multi-step inference process that sarcasm requires.
So you figure it out, but maybe 5 seconds too late?
That's often the experience.
Yeah.
You decode the literal meaning, you sense something was off, you finally piece together the context and the tone, you realize,
Yeah.
that was sarcastic. But the conversation has already moved 2 steps ahead.
Which must be incredibly frustrating.
It really is. You're constantly playing catch-up, and you miss the chance to react appropriately in the moment.
And finally, there's the fear factor, the anxiety factor.
Yeah, this is a big psychological barrier. Many C1 learners feel like they should be able to get this stuff. They're advanced, right?
Right.
So they're afraid to ask for clarification. They don't want to say, sorry, you're being serious, or was that a joke?
Right.
Because they worry it makes them look slow or like they don't understand English well enough.
So they default to.
They often default to the safe option, interpreting literally. It might be wrong, but it feels less risky in the moment than admitting confusion. But that prevents them from getting the real-time feedback they need to actually learn the cues.
It's a vicious cycle, almost. Fear prevents clarification, which prevents learning.
Exactly. Overcoming that anxiety is a key step.
Okay, this sounds like a mountain to climb, but it's definitely not impossible. Let's talk strategies. How can our listeners actively, systematically get better at spotting sarcasm and irony? What's the foundational approach?
The absolute golden rule, the mindset you need to cultivate, is active and holistic listening. You have to consciously train yourself to look beyond the literal words and actively hunt for the mismatch.
A mismatch again?
Always the mismatch. Stop just listening for what is said. Start listening for the gap between what is said and what should have been said or how it should have been said, given everything else you know.
So asking yourself questions as you listen.
Constantly. Ask. Do these words fit the situation? Do these words match the speaker's tone of voice? Do they match their facial expression? Do they align with what I know this person usually thinks or believes?
And if the answer to any of those is no,
Ding, ding, ding. That's your potential irony alert. That's the signal to engage the reversal process we talked about. Look for the contradiction.
given how vital prosody the sound is, how can we specifically train our ears for those subtle English tone shifts? Just listening more isn't always enough, is it?
Not passively, no.
Yeah.
You need dedicated prosody training. And this means going beyond just mimicking pronunciation. Try shadowing techniques, but focus specifically on copying the emotional contour, the intonation patterns, the rhythm of native speakers, especially when they're being sarcastic or dryly witty.
So mimic the music, not just the words.
Exactly. Find clips online of people being sarcastic. Listen closely. How does their pitch change? Does it go up or down unexpectedly? Is the pace slow or clipped? Then try to replicate that sound yourself. Even try delivering a really positive sentence like, "I'm having a wonderful time," with a deliberately flat, bored, sarcastic tone. Feel how it sounds different.
Reverse engineer it. Okay, what about media? We watch TV, movies. How can we use that strategically?
Strategic media consumption is key. Don't just passively watch. Target sitcoms or comedies known for witty dialogue or dry humor. Think shows like Frasier, The Office, maybe British panel shows.
And what do we do while watching?
Pause. When a line gets a laugh from the audience, or seems obviously ironic, hit pause. First, try to figure out why it was funny or ironic, just based on the sound and context, without subtitles.
Okay.
Then, really analyze the visual cues. Did the character roll their eyes, smirk, use a deadpan face? Then, maybe turn on the subtitles to confirm the literal words and analyze that gap between the literal meaning and the ironic delivery you just observed.
Breaking it down scene by scene.
Yes. Stand-up comedy is also fantastic for this. Comedians are masters of using tone, timing, and shared context to land punchlines that depend entirely on non-literal understanding. Analyze how they set up the irony.
Let's tackle that anxiety problem. In a real conversation, you're unsure, is it really okay to ask? Won't people think you're slow?
You have to prioritize clarity. It is absolutely okay and often appreciated if you politely ask for clarification. Good contextual awareness includes knowing when you need more information.
How would you phrase it?
Keep it light, maybe smile a bit. You could say something like, "Sorry, I'm still getting used to all the nuances. Was that meant seriously? Or were you making a joke?" Or just checking, should I take that literally?
That sounds reasonable.
It signals you're engaged and trying to understand properly, not that you're incompetent. And crucially, it gives you immediate feedback on whether your sarcasm radar was right or wrong in that specific instance. That feedback is gold.
Okay, what about the vocabulary barrier? Those idioms like bless your heart.
For lexical expansion, focus on context, not just definitions. When you learn a new idiom or phrase, don't just memorize its literal meaning. Actively research how and when it's typically used. Look for examples online. Does it often appear in sarcastic contexts? Note that down.
So learn the emotional baggage of the phrase, too.
Precisely. And consciously study examples of hyperbole and understatement. Read articles, watch interviews, listen to conversations, and notice how speakers use extreme language. Try to get a feel for the typical range so you can better spot when someone is going way outside it for ironic effect.
This sounds like a long-term project, developing the cultural understanding and the cognitive skills.
It is. It involves developing your theory of mind, Tom, consciously practicing inferring what other people might be thinking or feeling beneath their words. Make it a habit. Okay, they said X, but given everything I know, what's their likely actual take on this?
And becoming more cultural literate in general.
Yes, increasing your cultural literacy through reading, watching media, talking to native speakers about social norms and humor helps you grasp the implicit assumptions that irony often plays on. And maybe the most important piece of advice.
What's that?
Embrace mistakes. Seriously. You will misunderstand sarcasm sometimes. Everyone does, even native speakers occasionally. Don't see it as a failure. See it as a data point.
A learning opportunity.
Exactly. When you realize you missed it, rewind the situation in your head. What cues were there that you overlooked? Was it the slight smirk, the context you didn't know? Analyzing those misses is how your brain gradually learns to integrate all these subtle signals automatically. Be patient with yourself. It takes time and practice.
Hashtag TikTok outro.
You know, listening to all this, it really strikes me that detecting sarcasm and irony,
Yeah.
it's so much more than just an advanced vocabulary test. It's almost like an art form, isn't it?
It really is. It's a sophisticated dance of linguistic inference, yes, but also cultural empathy, quick cognitive processing.
It's about reading the whole situation, the script and the subtext, moving beyond just the surface words to engage with what's truly being communicated.
And mastering that skill, making that effort, it pays off hugely in the long run. It fundamentally changes how you listen. You go from just, passively decoding words to this much richer, more active engagement with the complexities of real human interaction. And honestly, in a world where so much communication is digital and lacks tone.
Yeah, like text messages or emails. Exactly. Being able to really discern these subtleties in spoken face-to-face English, that becomes an invaluable superpower for deeper connection and more effective communication.
A superpower. I like that. So embrace the challenge, listeners. Keep tuning those senses, your ears, your eyes, your understanding of context, and start unlocking those hidden, ironic meanings that make advanced English conversations so much richer and sometimes so much funnier. We really hope you found this deep dive incredibly helpful for your advanced English journey. If you did, please do like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We truly appreciate your support.